I will take the cue from where Soumitra left the talk, the last sentences. He emphasized very well on the necessity of the cellular mind offering the body consciousness, offering the body itself, so that it can be transformed. I think that is pretty much the essence of what we have been telling a couple of days back when we discussed about this day returning Satyavan must die. Now this is the whole crux of the thing. So it is not so simple as to really, of course we have been discussing it in relation with destiny and free will and freedom. But you see, the real thing that we have to discuss in Sri Aurobindo and Satyavan obviously is why has Narad used the word must die? Because this must is not only a determinism of the physical level, but on the occult level, it becomes necessary that there is a sacrifice made on the physical level for the higher consciousness to establish itself. That's quite the law of nature, a sacrifice, which in religion has taken some other form. But this is an occult law, that there has to be a sacrifice, and that's what Sri Aurobindo, about Sri Aurobindo's leaving his own body, the mother explains that when the Superman had to descend on the physical, a body had to be sacrificed. And so Sri Aurobindo says, I will sacrifice my body. Mother says, no, I will. He says, no. I will sacrifice my body. Your body is better form to carry on the work. So this was the sacrifice that was done by Sri Aurobindo, which is now preconceived in Savitri itself. So when Narad insists that this day returning Satyavan must die, this sacrifice is necessary because a new dimension of consciousness is about to come. So Narad does say, of course we have discussed on that, Narad does indicate that what is the new that is going to come. So he has not just left us with a negative thing that Satyavan must die and that's the end of the matter. I mean, I don't have much time today, so I would like to take you quickly through the thing. So Narad has given us a vision why he is telling about this sacrifice. In fact, there are a couple of lines, maybe I should refer those lines to you, is that there is only absolute determinism and free will is only an illusion created by nature. You see, this you must understand. Free will is an absolute illusion in the mind of man, but created purposefully by nature, just as nature has created in us even the ego for some of its own purposes. So what we said ultimately is that all this existence of ours is in fact what Shankaracharya told us, that all this is a mithya, because we are living constantly in an illusion. Why, even if you take matter, Mother would say this matter is an illusion. This is not true matter that we see here. This is false matter, she says. Even matter is false. So there's true matter behind. And she says the supermind is trying to unveil the true matter. So what is real? Matter is false. Our ego is an illusion. Our sense of freedom is an illusion. What's real about this world? And yet, Sri Aurobindo does not escape saying, oh, all this is illusion, leave the world. So now how to come out of this illusion and reach the reality? You see, the simple word, when I say the word, I have a realization or he is a realized person, what do you realize actually? Realize that this is an illusion. In fact, that's what Shankara also tells. That until you realize that this is an illusion, this will remain a mitha. The moment you think that this is a mitha, you will realize the real Brahman. So realization is nothing but recognizing who you are in fact. That is the true soul or the Brahman or the Atman, whatever you want to call. If that being the truth of it, now in the light of that question of freedom and free will, what we have seen, what we said last, that's what the mother had given us. A very beautiful explanation, very simple. She says there's no one determinism. We talked about the absolute determinism. She says no, there are different levels of determinism, layers of determinism. And that brings in a lot of clarity in our mind. What we said is the material determinism on the level of matter. There's a vital determinism, there's a mental determinism, there's a psychic determinism, and beyond. What does it mean? That as you come down the determinism, it becomes harder and narrower and more intense. This is absolute. As you go up from this material determinism, your free will becomes absolute. So there is a kind of an inverse movement. From above if you come, the determinism becomes absolute. From below if you go up, free will becomes absolute. So it's in this range we understand. I was giving you last time the example of material determinism. She says, if there is this material determinism, you can change the lower by the higher. She would say, the vital plane has an altogether different determinism, its own particular determinism. But when you introduce the vital determinism into the determinism of the physical, that produces a kind of combination that changes everything. This is the principle that I would like you to understand, that this is absolutely determined, but when the vital determination is introduced, the physical can change. I was giving you the example of the law of the physical, that if I leave this chalk, it has to fall down. This is called the physical determinism. You may call it law of gravity or whatever scientific term you give. Mother in fact gives an example of a tile of a roof falling down. Something had gotten loose and then sometimes it just slides down and falls down. And supposing a man is walking below that, obviously it's supposed to fall on his head. But then she says, if a yogi is watching this movement of the tile from far, he can intervene. Now this intervention is, if a yogi is at this level, he can intervene and stop the tile falling on his head. That is exactly why the yogis have a greater capacity to intervene in the material world. Because each time a higher force comes in, it can change the destiny on the physical level. If the intervention is not there, then obviously the tile would fall on the person. So this is what we said last time, is the question of karma. But there is karma on the physical level, karma on the vital level, karma on the mental level. Because what all you think, you are envious, you are jealous, you are anger, you are violent in your emotions against somebody, some people, it's going to come back. That's what somebody asked them the other day. Is there a nation's karma? Yes, there is a nation's karma also. In fact, there is a particular incident when Sri Aurobindo, while explaining the Satyagraha movement, in those freedom times, he says, today India is becoming more and more violent. It is a kind of a flashback of the suppression of the violence during that time. So the nation itself, if it has conquered some people, if it has really killed thousands and lakhs of people, then it is going to have the repercussions during its history. And that's one of the things why India being what it is, it has never conquered and killed anybody outside its own boundaries. Leave some of the contemporary problems. So India as a nation has a wonderful dharma, the karma. It has not conquered and killed. So those nations which have destroyed the others are definitely going to reap the consequences of their own killing, destruction, whatever manner. So this is the question of absolute karma, but on the vital level the emotions will come back to you. That's why we say don't hate anyone, don't have jealousies, don't have violence, because one day you are going to suffer the same thing in a different form from a different person. At that time don't blame anybody saying, hey, why are you hating me, why am I undergoing violence? Remember, one day you had spread out your own violent thoughts and jealousies and all that. Similarly on the mental level. Mental level too, you have bad ideas, it's criticism, thinking wrong and bad about somebody. If you all the time are on the critical moment or thoughts, as we said yesterday, even these thoughts are going to come back to you. So there is the karma on all the three levels. The physical, the vital, the mental. So it's only when there is an intervention from the higher levels that we have the psychic. Now psychic determinism also is not completely free. You may think, it is about something to do with the divine, but also is not free. Because when it comes down to the vital and the physical, it is limited. It can do better. Definitely it can make your life smoother, happier and more comfortable and less dangerous and all that. And your health may be good and all that. But for transforming the physical, it doesn't have much of capacity. It can give you a very quiet, joyful life. But transformation, the psychic being does not have that much capacity. So Sri Aurobindo and the mother, they speak about a higher destiny we can call the spiritual determinism, but beyond all that is the supramental determinism. Now this is the only determinism that has the full freedom, full free will. Now that is the necessity, because that supramental determinism alone has the strength and the power and the consciousness and the force to not only change, intervene, but transform the physical. So now we understand why Sri Aurobindo is insisting, or continuously has worked decades and decades to bring down the supermind. Now psychicization is not yet a transformation of the physical and the vital and the mental. Psychicization is what we say governed by the cycle. That means the instrumentation is under the direct influence. It is not yet transformed. We say, now my mind is full of doubts. As somebody was telling, is not clear. It's some kind of it doesn't have enough capacity to think, to write, to imagine, to write poetry, etc. But if my psychic influence comes on the mind, then my mind becomes tremendously capacitated. But if I have wrong ideas, if I have ill ideas, psychic being does not transform them. It gives you all the positive things of the mind, your capacity to reason, capacity to imagination, logic, intuition, all that is done. But transformation is coming only at the level of the supramental. So that is why the need and necessity of supermind. In the old yogas or until now, there have been thousands of people who have been psychicized, they have had the realization of the Atman, but they could not transform the physical. They have even have great saints are there in whom the psychic and the soul have influenced their thoughts, they become very benevolent, very loving, they really spread these vibrations of love and greatness from them. But the transformation of the physical, they could not. And especially the question of immortality. Coming back to what our friend told us, the transformation of the physical was not possible till now. So if, as he was telling us just now, very rightly, as a very good analysis, if for the new creation, if we have to continue with the new creation, if the new creation has to be one that is permanently progressive. In fact, the Mother herself gives the message that this new creation, or this creation, not the new creation but the present creation, will be eternally renewing itself. It will not be dissolved, but it will renew itself for a permanent continuity, which necessarily means the body has to renew itself, which necessarily means that the present body cannot survive into the future. There's got to be a transformation. And for this transformation, what is the need? The need of the supermind. You see how all this philosophy and yoga and logic, they come together, and that is why I always say Sri Aurobindo is not just an accident in time that he was born in 1872, 15th of August per chance. His birth has been one of those destinies of the world for the new creation. Because the new creation had to come, continue with the matter, but not material thing, physical as it is. It has to be transformed. So Sri Aurobindo has to bring the supermind. And that is exactly the essence of what we have seen in Savitri. That we have the question of when Savitri tells, she's telling Narad, her will must cancel her body's destiny. Now this is where I stopped last time. Why is Sri Aurobindo writing that Savitri has to cancel her body's destiny? How can she cancel somebody else's body's destiny? She can cancel her own body's. But her body's destiny is here. Her is not actually her, it is Satyavan's destiny. But Sri Aurobindo, as I said, has repeated this sentence, this phrase, couple of more times, where she consciously cancels the other person's destiny. That is what, I'd also quoted Sri Aurobindo telling you, because this transformation of the physical is, for that there was this kind of a divine play. One body dies and the other spiritual partner, she is awake, she is alive to bring down the supermind into this so-called dead body. It's almost an exact parallel between Mother and Sri Aurobindo and Satyavan and Savitri. It's exact parallel. If you go back and read these lines and sentences, you will see the same thing. That is why it is also predicted that Satyavan must die. And this kind of a prediction, Sri Aurobindo himself makes it exactly almost 1 year before his passing away. Even though 1 year is more or less the same. Just after he and Mother had the discussion, 1 year later, he leaves his body. And the Mother at that time, of course, unlike what happened in the story Savitri, when Satyavan dies, she takes his head and keeps it on her lap and on her lap he passes away. And we saw yesterday somewhere the line, the exact hour, the exact day and the exact stroke were predicted. And here too, in Sri Aurobindo's case too, almost the exact date and everything is selected. Because it is said by some authors, Amal Kiran and others, that you see 2nd December was the ashram's physical education annual program. So Sri Aurobindo was waiting, that because mother used to go for 2nd December. So he didn't want to jeopardize the program. So he waited until the 2nd December program was over, the mother would get free, and then on the 5th, he decides to leave. And then when he decided to leave the body, unlike what happened in the story, that Satyavan goes, is as a kind of he was axing the tree. So at that time he felt a tremendous headache and then he collapses. But with this Sri Aurobindo's case, it was very different. Mother comes into his room because Champaklal, somebody calls the mother saying that Sri Aurobindo is in his last moments. So the mother comes into the room, and she sees that Sri Aurobindo is wanting to leave. But then she also says, as long as I stood there, he didn't want to leave. So knowing that, she withdraws from the room and tells Champaklal that anything happens, call me back. And that's exactly what happens in the morning about 1:25 a.m. Mother is called back. So these are moments which are not just, given out of the blue. And then this question of the transformation of the body, this is foreseen by Sri Aurobindo. This struggle, in two instances we see a direct confirmation of this event. One is a poem called God's Labour by Sri Aurobindo, where he speaks very clearly, I have been digging deep and long mid a horror of filth and mire, a bed for the golden river's song, a home for the deathless fire. I have laboured and suffered in matter's night to bring the fire to man, but the hate of hell and human spite are my meed since the world began. Well, that's what, of course, I don't have to read the whole thing. And then, that famous passage of Narad, where it says, a day may come when she must stand unhelped. This is, you see, the same thing. That's what I ended up my article saying. This day, the importance of that this day is there. Because which is that day? It is the day when Satyavan must die. It is a day exactly, in the book 1, canto 1, those of you have read it, this was the day when Satyavan must die. The line comes exactly 365th line. 365th line, that means exactly 12 months have passed. And therefore Sri Aurobindo says, this was the day when Satyavan must die. Whereas Narad said, this day returning, he must die. But Sri Aurobindo last time he says, this was the day. And now this was the day, Sri Aurobindo refers to that, but in Savitri, the last passage that was dictated by Sri Aurobindo to Chapak Bhai was exactly this passage. It was almost, just like Narad told Savitri about the dangers of the passing away of Savitri, Satyavan, so too Sri Aurobindo leaves the last message to mother and says, a day may come when she must stand unhelped. On a dangerous brink of the world's doom and hers, carrying the world's future on her lonely breast, carrying the human hope in a heart left soul, to conquer or fail on a last desperate verge. Alone with death and close to extinction's edge, in her soul's climbing beyond mortal time, when she stands soul with death or with God, or soul with God, apart upon a silent desperate brink, alone with herself and death and destiny, As on some verge between time and timelessness, when being must end or life rebuild its base, alone she must conquer or alone she must fall. So these lines are equally applicable to Savitri on the level of symbolism, and this is exactly what happened in 1962. The mother was on this dangerous brink, extinction's edge. It was her own experience of death. She goes to the other side, she experiences what's happening on the other side, she comes back. So had she not come back into a physical, it would have been the whole calamity, that there would have been an extinction. So that's what I wanted to tell you, that we have in this poem here an exact parallel between Madhur and Sri Aurobindo. The bringing of the supermind upon earth, the coming of the supermind is necessity, and a single line that this was the day when Satyavan must die. As I started telling, this whole poem is really, it sort of hangs on this single sentence, because it really gives you the question of determinism and free will. Well, the last thing I wanted to clarify is somebody had asked the question the other day, on the first day I think, where our destiny, coming back to the question of destiny, our destiny is written in double terms. Through nature's contraries we draw nearer God, out of the darkness we still grow to light. Now this question of our destiny is written in double terms. Double terms is exactly this question of the personal free will and the divine determinism. Both of them conjoin. In fact, there is another line where Sri Aurobindo says, our destiny is, our fate is a balance drawn in destiny's book. Man can accept his fate, he can refuse. And now this is the line, O King, thy fate is a transaction done at every hour between nature and soul. So this is the double term, because one side nature is giving us a line of action, the other side soul is wanting to do. So one side there is the apparent free will, other side there is a complete determinism. In fact, just this morning I recollected that this question of absolute determinism is also referred to by Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. We have in chapter 11 a beautiful verse which says, therefore do you arise, get thee glory, having conquered the enemies, enjoy thou an opulent kingdom. By me verily are all these already slain, do thou become the occasion only, O Sabya Sachin. See this phrase, by me verily are all these already slain. So before Mahabharata war began, the Kurukshetra began, all these people were killed, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, every one of them. So he says further, slay thou by me who are slain, Drona and Bhishma and Karna and Jayadratha, as well as other hero fighters. Be not pained and troubled, fight, thou shalt conquer the adversary in the battle. So here we see the question of all that is already predetermined, that who are the persons who are going to be killed. So Krishna ultimately, how does he console and how does he advise? That you know the truth, that I have killed them, all of them, they are already killed by me. And he sees all these great warriors getting into the big, the time slayers, the slayer of time. He sees, Arjuna sees all of them slain. So what does it imply? That all action that takes place on the physical level is already taken on some other level. He was referring to about the subtle physical. Saumitra was telling you that things happen first in the subtle physical. Not even the subtle physical. They happen beyond the subtle physical in the transcendental level itself, on the universal level. So, Sri Krishna is telling us that I have already killed them. So in fact, why is it and how is it that Sri Aurobindo has foreseen the coming of the supermind. He has described in Savitri in great detail the coming of the future. It is not a prophecy in time. It is not a prophecy like you have so many prophecy people. He is not telling you tomorrow it will happen, or after 100 years or 200 years. It is a prophecy in consciousness. That means, depending on our own evolution, faster the evolution, the spiritual evolution, faster will be the descent of this supramental race. So you cannot say how long it will take. In fact, somebody close to the mother had asked her about when will Auroville be made. The mother said it will take a minimum of 300 years. So already 50 years have gone by. You think another 250 or 250 years Auroville will be born fully? I doubt it. But it depends again on our hastening with the consciousness, not just hastening with the outer manifestation, but each one individually has to manifest a consciousness. That is where I was telling you when Anuradha and Manoj had given about this, they talked on Swadharma. You see, we had to give to the youth the new vision. There are many alternative visions that are going around the world. There are you open your internet, hundreds of them are there. But we as Aurobindonians, we are projecting what Sri Aurobindo and the mother are giving us as a vision. So my question is, if you know the vision, then the choice is yours. You want to follow that vision? You walk the path. You have the free will to choose or not. Well, in the West also there are many visions that have been given. In India also there are many visions. So let the individual at least have the choice of choosing his own vision. When you say he should choose a Swadharma, who knows, out of this 14, 17 people, there may be one person who chooses, like you have this boy Siddhartha who has chosen to be a participant in this vision. So that's what I'm telling Anuradha also, that she has given a beautiful vision from the Vedanta side. So this vision of Sri Aurobindo, of the supermind, the new creation, is something unique. I mean, unheard of in this entire human history. And just the listening to that, because I've had interaction with a lot of young people also, when they are given this vision of the new creation, of the new Superman, their mind starts suddenly thinking, my God, is it possible? I thought we are the best people, and then you see so many technical technology experts, they say 2050 we are going to have. The other day I was hearing somebody in Surat. In 2050, there will be more robots than human beings. My God, I started, I said, fortunately I will not be alive in 2050 to see this terrible creation of the world. But technologists are already giving this kind of a thing, and if a youngster comes to know that, oh my God, in 2015, that this will be the humanity will vanish and robots will come, maybe there is a depression in these young people. That all of them, everything will be served by robots, and what is the question of the consciousness? So I would insist that we should give the parallel spiritual vision. When technology is really spreading so fast their word, that robots will come, this will come, the aeroplanes will come. So the spiritualists should give what is spiritual vision of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Because that will counterbalance. So I think he was telling Soumitra or somebody else, no, not you, somebody else, that even this fact of sharing this new vision gives to the younger people, because as some of those people are coming to you, the 17 per group, they have all rejected. There is a kind of a rejection of the past, rejection of the usual, this technology, this thing, this robots. I think the young girl who was there with you, Sushmita, somebody, she said, we don't want to use our mobiles anymore. They are not. It's just there is a rejection in some people of this technology. So if they are given this alternative vision, there is a hope for them. And Sri Aurobindo is that new hope. So without that hope, mankind would die. Already technology is enforcing us to commit suicide. So I think Shomitra was telling again that how many people are being born with all kinds of deformations. However, but now coming back to this, so we had discussed question of freedom. But there's one thing, I'm sure somebody is going to ask me the question, if all is so much determined, if free will is a kind of an absolute illusion, then wouldn't that be a kind of a negative thing? Then should we leave our world saying, this is all an illusion, why should I act? But don't you remember, Mother has said clearly, nature gives us these three illusions and makes us move, for she requires us to move. And in the synthesis, I could not find the paragraph, somewhere when he mentions so beautifully that all these negative things, these problems, these issues, these controversies, is, I said, if I can remember the right word, he says, God brings them to you. And brings a different thing to you, a different problem to you, a different issue to you. That day when I was teaching that, maybe it's 10 years back now, I still remember it zapped me. I said, that means the divine is so close to me and you and every one of us. He really takes care to see what is useful for your growth, what is useful for her growth, what is useful for you. Although it is omniscient, is there, determinism is there are two different aspects of the divine. One, the impersonal divine, the other, the personal divine. So between the impersonal and the personal, there is a divinity that's close to each one of us. And I still remember I said, my God, I cannot believe that God is looking after me so closely. I mean, even when we say prayers or go here and there, but somebody is, I think, that great outstretched hand of the divine. I mean, if I look at it from a from the angle of a devotion, I'm so thrilled to see that God is choosing problems, solutions, issues to each one of us. That means He is not that creator who has just left it and said, I've determined you from time eternal and you should do that. So there is this impersonal determinism, but there is a personal divinity who comes to us as an avatar, who comes to us as a vibhuti, who comes to us as a guru. So these formations, the incarnations of the divine on the personal level are coming to us to guide you personally. So let us not be thinking, oh, everything is, we don't have the freedom. As yesterday I told you, the only free will you have is to ascend. This is very important note I left last time also. We have no other free will. As I told you, every one of them is completely determined. But the free will that we have absolutely is to move above, to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. And how can this be done? By sadhana, by yoga. That's why the mother would say, if you turn to spiritual life and surrender fully as much as possible, your entire karma would be washed off. All these karmas will be negated. If not negated and washed off, at least if you are say on the spiritual life, you have surrendered yourself to the spiritual life. If you are really practicing a yoga, then you will see all this lose their grip over you. That's why even all that you may have done on the physical material level, all the akarmas, all that get cancelled when you turn to spiritual life, because this spiritual life intervenes. So, to conclude, we have a free will only to rise in our consciousness. If you move on the horizontal level, our hands and legs are completely bound. And if you think that you are free, as the mother says, You think you are free, it's an illusion. She says you have three illusions. Illusion that we are free. Everybody says, oh, I'm free, I can make my destiny. That's the first illusion. The second illusion that is that we can use our freedom for choosing. You say, no, I'm free to choose wherever I want to go. I want to go to Delhi or go to Chennai. So that's again an illusion. Last one, the third illusion of choosing. You say, no, I have chosen. You see? And all this, he says, is a mechanism, tool by nature. But there's one free will left with us, is to go above, to go beyond, because that free will takes us to our true destiny and our real destination, that is the divine. You may start the journey today. Sri Krishna himself tells us, it is never too late to start this journey upward. You can start it, people in their old age can start it. My mother also has said, doesn't matter. Start the journey upward. Because as Swamitra was also telling us, what you take beyond this birth is nothing of matter, nothing of the vital, nothing of the mental, only the psychic memories. And what are those psychic memories? These psychic memories are those wherein there has been a touch of Godwardness. It doesn't mean you have to see lights and divinities and go to temples and churches. Even if you see a beautiful rose and it says, the touch of beauty, the touch of music, the touch of compassion, the touch of width of your consciousness, you help somebody or somebody will tell you. These are the facets of the divine. And these moments, which he was asking you, tell me what are those moments of the divine. I've seen all those things that you have said. But these touches of beauty, delight, love, in whatever form they are in nature, be it the birth of your daughter, be it the birth of something beautiful, be it a rose in your garden, be it sunrise. So beauty, delight and love. These are the three facets of the divine in nature. So if you are touched by that, you are touched by the Godward emotion, and that gets into your psychic emotion. So finally, we see that and then that is what actually Savitri herself does. She does a yoga, tapasya, yoga of Savitri, you must have seen in book 6 and 7 and 8 and all that. You see, Savitri was an avatar. And yet she has to do tapasya. Because she has come down to the material determinism where she has to face that Satyavan must die. So in order to change this must die, Savitri also has to rise in her consciousness, get into the realization of the soul. So Sri Aurobindo has really shown us through this Savitri, the way, that's why I call it the integral yoga through Savitri. So it tells us only by raising your consciousness will you be able to alter the determinisms of the lower level. So Savitri rises to her own soul, rises beyond into her own transcendental Shakti, and then that Shakti she brings down to intervene in the physical level. So this is the only freedom we have to grow into the divinity. Because what takes us, our young lady referred to that Upanishad, Shreyas and prayers. Not only what is good for us, but what is good for us in the spiritual growth. Of course, the word good is very comprehensive, but Yama would say Shreyas and prayers. So prayers is what is pleasing to the senses. And mother would say pleasure is there for the common man, because pleasure is always accompanied by pain. Then there is joy higher than pleasure. It is meant for the desireless man. I don't think Yama mentioned all that. There's a question of joy meant for the desireless man. Then there is ecstasy for the perfected yogi. And there is Ananda for the Brahman. For the Lord, she says, for the Supreme Lord. So these are the levels of this even prayers and prayers. So Mother clarifies what's the meaning of prayers. Common man, ordinary man, is sensorial pleasures. A little higher, desireless man. Now you understand what Buddhism tells, what Mother says, Sri Krishna says, everybody says, don't have desires. Then only you will have joy. Rest of them is all chota mota pleasures and happiness which are ephemeral. But the greater you become desireless, the greater is your joy. Some people even mention in that happiness, when I have moments when my joy does not depend on anything. But the moment anything is attached to your happiness, it's not joy. It's a happiness or a pleasure. And then the perfected yogi, she doesn't say just ecstasy is not for yogi, a perfected yogi. So you can imagine the status of Sri Aurobindo. That is that ecstasy. But ecstasy doesn't mean it is a flamboyant face. But the bharpur, the fullness of the ocean. You must have seen on a moonlit night the ocean. This fullness, it doesn't flutter. That fullness of delight is that ecstasy. A perfected yogi. And Ananda is for the Supreme Lord. So friends, you see now this question of free will and all that. Philosophically it is intricate. And yet, thanks to the Mother, at least for my mind it's very clear now, because of these three levels, we can think of free will. So even if you want to, as somebody, you said the example of the murderer. No, if you have killed somebody, you will have to face these consequences. A murderer ran to the lap of the mother, said, "Ma, police is chasing me, please protect me." He said, "Sorry, you murdered in your last life. Go, police will catch you." So you cannot escape next life saying, "Oh, I murdered last life, chalta hai." So these consequences follow you life after life. But had this young man, the gentleman, turned to a spiritual life, surrendered to the divine, then this police would not have come across him. But then he would have surpassed the consequences of the physical vital. So here we have this question of free will we have. But if you think that you have free will, there is one more point. On the material, physical level, I think I have free will. I think I am free. And what do? I say, I have done that. I am the author. I have created this center. And therefore, what is that I? The ego. So as long as you are acting through the ego and by the ego, you are bound to karma. You may do the greatest of orables, greatest of sakars, greatest of anything. The moment you say I, it is bound to karma on the physical level, on the vital level, on the mental level. So all that is there. So what does the Gita tell us? Same thing. First you start with the I am the doer. Then it says no. I am not the doer, Lord. You are the doer. Somebody gave you a story the other day, some woodcutter story. I was not there, but I was told. Things may not change. I may be doing the same sakar work, you will do the same this work, and you will do the same work. But before I was telling, I am the doer, I am the creator, I am the, please don't introduce me, founder, what is that called? Founder, director. What does it mean? It's all boosting one's ego. So the moment you say, I am so and so, you have the ego and you are bound to face the consequences here. The next stage, that is where the growth, the age factor comes in. Because this ego, out of its boosting, saying, I am the founder editor, and once or twice or 4 times you get a good slap. Then you say, yeah, mother, I think I'm not the doer yet. I don't want to put this card, a visiting card. I throw it away. I say, Ma, you are the doer. It may be out of necessity, because the moment I take away the ego and I put the mother, simple. भैया blame भी आपका है, credit भी आपका है, everything आपका. Before I used to take the blame and the credit and all that, but now I say, mother, sorry, I withdraw, you take the whole thing. Then the mother says, okay. But okay बोलने से एक दिन नहीं होता. Even to give to the mother, sometimes it takes a long time. If you are called for being given an award in Lahore, or not Lahore, what that's called, Lucknow and Bombay, and it says, Dr. Reddy, you come, you have been given an award. उस दिन के मैं माता जी को भेजता हूँ कि मैं जाता हूँ. I go saying, oh my God, Dipshika, I've been given an award. So let's fly the next, take the flight. I don't say, mother, I've not done this, you take the flight and go. But a yogi would do that. A Nolnida or Champaklal, they would say, no, sorry, I didn't do this job, somebody else did it. So you become the instrument of the divine. That's the second stage of yoga, tells the Gita, and the same thing is there. Third stage is when Gita says, Ma, what all I'm doing, you are doing, what nature is doing, you are doing. You are the sole existent. You are the sole person. Right from determinism is all yours. My failures, my knocks, my death. That is sadhana. And that is a sadhana that can be done by elevating yourself. And that is a sadhana. I mean, Savitri is so incredible. The more you see, I'm seeing this, everything is there. This Savitri in the beginning says, I'm greater than destiny, I'm greater. That's fine. But then she has to come down to the normal level, lower level, and then start the sadhana from A, B, C, D. Even she resists. She says, no, I will not do that. Why the hell should... In fact, there is a refusal when she says, what's big about it? Why should I give away all... Why should I depend on death and other? She revolts. Then that is the moment when she thinks that she is the person who is going to do that. Then the voice says, sorry, realize your soul. It's only when you realize your soul that you can serve the others. Don't think you can do much. So all these human stages of growth are also there. That's why I started telling you, Savitri is really the be-all and end-all. It's the modern synthesis, quintessence, not synthesis, quintessence of all the Vedas, Upanishads and the Gita and everything. So it's really the great boon that the Supreme has given to us. The great Supreme has given boons to Savitri, 4 of them. She said, no, I want for earth and men. So Sri Aurobindo has left for us, even without being asked, a boon called Savitri. So even if you don't read anything else, you will say life divine is different, difficult, language is big, paragraphs are 2.5 pages, all that fine. But just pick up Savitri. Because that is a direct contact to Sri Aurobindo's consciousness. Direct, D-I-R-E-C-T, caps. You cannot touch Savitri without touching Sri Aurobindo's body. And I'm telling you this out of not a mental imagination. Even if you don't want to go to Samadhi or here or that, doesn't matter. Keep the Savitri and touch it, and you have touched Mother and Master. That's why, friends, if you have not read it, it's never too late. If you don't understand it, just don't bother. Because when you go to a guru, you touch his feet, you think you want to understand anything? Just touch his feet, bow down, and it's over. All your problems, Mother herself has said, if you have any problems, open Savitri Random at any page and read it. There your problems are solved. It's a living guru. And the greatest boon and grace Somebody was telling about the word anugraha yesterday, somebody told you. Whatever, verbs are not important. It's a divine grace. And you and me will not realize it. Mother herself said, it's not meant for the present humanity. We are too busy with all our mobiles, internet, information, this information, that guru. All this will come and go. She says, Savitri is meant for the new man. They will value it. They will understand it. They will feel it. But can we not have that grace? We may not be the Superman, far from it. But why do we go to temple and to samadhi and to church and to Gurudwara every day? The whole temple and Gurudwara and church and the Lord is right in front of you on your table. Touch it, pray to Him.